Hey guys, it's coming my review for the first week of Big Brother 26. Of course, I already have covered the first 2 episodes, but this is the first full week talking about episodes 3 through 5. And going into this week, I really just had no expectations because the premiere, similar to every other season all the modern seasons at this point, was just absolutely nothing to me. I had no opinion on it whatsoever. If I did, it wasn't exactly positive. I didn't really know if I liked the idea of the AI theme. I was really concerned by the things that they were hinting at when they talked about Ainsley changing the game and things like that, and her, implementing all these new ideas to like evictions and nominations. I was really worried how that was going to turn out, but I was trying to stay optimistic. I was hoping that this would be a really good week, and holy shit, I could not have been any more surprised than what we got this week, because listen, we've had some really promising starts to modern seasons, but I don't think we have had this great of a first week in a really long time. And I am just really excited to see how the season does turn out. Now, full disclosure, I will say, currently, when I'm filming this video, there are some not so great things happening right now on the feeds and things like that. And there's a lot of things that I have some very strong opinions on that I will absolutely be talking about in week 2. And they're not really positive to talk about because I'm just really fucking annoyed at the way production is handling things. But I want to focus on this week and just how great it really was. Everything we really were able to get, and really just be positive for what hopefully can be a really good season of Big Brother, because I really do think this is a very promising start. And yes, like I said, I've been positive during, the beginning of seasons before. Big Brother 25, for example, if you guys watched my podcast, last year, I fucking loved, that season up until the stupid zombie week. Then I kind of despised it. But the first few weeks of that season were just a pure adrenaline rush, and I was so into what was going on. 23, I think, also had a really good start. But the thing about 26, right off the bats, that makes it stand out so much from the other seasons is that at least by the end of the week, as crazy as things were, there was some kind of structure. There was some kind of understanding of how things are going to play out. With the way things go this week, even by the end of it, there really is no indication of how things are going to play out moving forward. This is a rapidly unpredictable week. This is a rapidly unpredictable group of house guests, and I feel like this is going to be one of those seasons that is just constantly ever-changing. A lot of these people are just playing for themselves, but also are playing so suboptimally that they're already just tarnishing their game left and right. I said this on Twitter, they're either being like really subtle and under the radar and it's hard to read them, or they're just so over the top that it basically is just ruining their game by the minute, just because of how just unhinged they are. But that's exactly what I want to see in a Big Brother season. I feel like if we're able to continue what we got this week, this can end up being one of the most impressive seasons we have seen in a very long time that really just kind of goes against the grain of what we expect to see. But again, I think we should just go ahead and, stop rambling and just get into it. We're going to go ahead and start off with Sunday's episode, which to me, this is like a quintessential episode of what a Big Brother episode should do. This was a 90-minute episode, and I was really concerned what that was going to be like, because the last time we got a 90-minute episode and it wasn't an eviction, they spent like 50% of it on a comp, and I'm very happy to say that is not the case with this episode. They actually did, I think, a really good job of showcasing everybody and really giving us a sense of where everybody is at, showing us some of the earlier connections. This is one of the more promising third episodes in a season I think we've had in quite a bit, and it kind of makes me start to want to maybe see them, do this more often, do more 90-minute episodes, find some time. I know maybe it'll conflict with your schedule and things like that, but maybe try to find time to do more 90-minute episodes, because I think it really does end up benefiting the show quite massively. It's worked really well for Survivor, and obviously Big Brother's very different in the sense where they don't really know how to edit things because of the fact that, like, they don't know who's going to do well. But I think we get in this episode is just way more satisfying than what we typically do get. So I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it. So we start off, everyone's going around and introducing themselves, and we immediately see just the chaos that's going to ensue this season, because right as Tucker is talking about his experience as a chef and things like that, and how excited he is for Cook to Everyone, in comes Lisa, basically just completely upstaging him about how she's a celebrity chef. She's got these edible glitters, and, he just has protein powder and things like that. And I think this just immediately just sets the tone for what I hope this season is going to be, because this rivalry is so incredibly ridiculous. So much of it is just centered around Lisa and her feeding edible glitter to everybody, and her not being able to have any real self-awareness or sense of boundaries whatsoever, and Tucker really having a problem with that and him just making everything about her. But that's the kind of rivalry I feel like we don't get enough of in Big Brother. People hating each other simply just for the sake of it, and that's exactly what is going on with Tucker here, and I think this could end up being one of the most entertaining rivalries of the entire season. Lisa is an insane player, by the way. Like, just the way that she is just so confrontational all the time, and she has, like I said, zero self-awareness. She's never able to understand why people are disliking her or how what she's doing might be making people feel uncomfortable. It's just so fun to watch, and I feel like she's going to be a player that just, as long as she's in the season, she's going to give us some entertainment, and I think this scene just perfectly showcased that. I also feel like this introduction with the house guests is just a perfect example of how much the 90 minutes benefited from that, because we got a lot more time to see people's reaction to things. We see Cedric talks about how he wants to, like, hide his occupations like an intelligence analyst from everyone and things like that. So again, I think a really good start. And this continues to be the case throughout the episode. I think we see a lot of conversations in this episode that we probably otherwise wouldn't have seen if we didn't have the 90 minutes. Like, for example, this scene between Matt and Kenny, and them bonding over Kenny being in the Air Force, and Matt's dad also being in the Air Force, and his dad being a police officer. I have no investment whatsoever in them as a duo. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but at least it helps us kind of establish why these two have this common ground and why they're able to come together. So I think they do a good job with that. There's a really good moment with, like, Makensy, Chelsie, Brooklyn, and Rubina, and how they want to start off this girls' alliance and hoping that the women can run the season and things like that, which we'll see. I will say, not to delve too much into feeds, but the four of them at this moment are still currently talking about this potentially, so maybe this could end up going somewhere, and I think they do a good job of kind of hinting at it. And I really want to mention Chelsie and Cedric for a second, because these are two people who were downgraded in the game, and you wouldn't even really be able to tell throughout the week, because they are in just such great positions this entire time. Chelsie in particular is someone who I was just so impressed by this entire week. Her, ending up in all these different alliances and bonding with so many people and making these genuine connections. I mean, honestly, the downgrade that was supposed to be, like, a punishment, I think honestly became a positive for the both of them. They didn't have to promise anything to anybody. They didn't have to worry about being put on the block, because everyone kind of and they didn't show this on the show, but, like, everybody kind of collectively agreed that it would be cruel and harsh to do that, which, yes, it is. So I'm glad that they end up not doing that. And I'm also glad because I really like Chelsie and Cedric so far, and I really like that we got to see both of them really thriving throughout this entire week. But we also get this moment with Makensy where, and this was actually the first thing we saw in the feeds, she talks about how great Angela could be at the game and that she is someone that they could potentially pull into an alliance, but Chelsie talks about how she may be a bit too emotional, so you already see that people are kind of skeptical of Angela and things like that. The reality is Makensy was also very skeptical of Angela and kind of pushing her name, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Basically, we do get this, but of course, but easily, I think the biggest stuff we get here, and I think inarguably, is just all the shenanigans with Matt and Angela. I mean, just such a fun rivalry, especially with just how unexpected it is. They're just having this conversation, and Angela, I think, jokingly brings up how he's gonna be like this real serious threat and things like that, and how all the women are gonna be coming after him. And the thing is, like, she's not wrong. Like, right off the bat, I will say, I don't think anything she says here is wrong, because you look at Matt's type in the Big Brother game, usually ends up going very far. Coasts on, has a really impeccable social game, is able to bond well with everyone, is able to, just kind of get everybody in his corner. Physically, he ends up killing the game and things like that, ends up being in this, crazy majority alliance that runs the game. That seems like Matt's type. So I totally understand why Angela is saying this sort of as a backhanded compliment, but also as something that I think she is generally worried about. I can totally understand that, but unfortunately, Matt is not someone who likes it when you bring up his physicality. He's trying to move away from that as much as he possibly can. He's already being stereotyped, and he really just wants to be his true, authentic self and things like that. So, look, there's a lot of things I have to say about this rivalry. I think that this was just so unexpected, but also so different from how we normally see it play out, because in any other season, Matt is the one that's in power here, and Angela is the one that is sitting on the block, and she is the one that is the victim in this situation. But in reality, well, that's not the case at all, because, well, we'll get to it a little bit later, but let's just say Matt kind of did this to himself, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I really enjoy the rivalry between these two. I think it's so much fun to watch. Easily, I think one of the highlights of this entire week is just seeing these two go back and forth, and it's just so much fun to get to watch overall. But yeah, like I said, I think they just do a really good job of showing all these different connections and all these potential story arcs. Matt ends up going to Tucker, talks about how Lisa's like really threatening and things like that, so immediately we know that Lisa's like a really big target. So already I was like, okay, they're doing a really good job of just showcasing everything. Normally there's like a coalition of people in the game that are just not shown on feeds, and I don't think you can say that about this episode. Even someone like Leah, who doesn't do a ton in this episode, has that segment about like chubby chasers and things like that, so they really did do a good job of just showing a little bit of everybody. But the other part I was really worried about with this episode is what the hell Ainsley was going to do, because for me, anytime I hear twist in modern BB, I immediately am just hitting the panic button, just thinking of the worst possible options. Like, that's literally how it goes, because most of the time, especially these days, the twists are fucking horrible, especially last season. I mean, just completely sucked all the momentum out of the game with pretty much every twist they ended up coming up with, completely ruined the multiverse theme and things like that. And I really just expected this to be, and because of that, I really just expect this to be something really bad. But I gotta say, this honestly might be one of the first seasons in a while that I actually kind of like the twists that are implemented into this season. Everything Ainsley is doing so far, I don't really have a problem with. I have always said the best twists in Big Brother are the ones that don't really end up hurting the format all that drastically, that actually end up bringing something different and fresh to the game that wasn't there before. I think a perfect example of this is, and this is going to be a weird one to bring up, I think the idea of the split house in 24 was a great one, just they didn't know how to execute it. But I think the actual twist is a really cool idea. It does something different with that point of the game when things are usually pretty set in stone in the jury phase. It actually makes it a lot more exciting if handled well, and I think something like that, really could have worked out if they had just tweaked a lot of shit and done things a lot differently, and maybe not have half the house guests outside with bugs everywhere. That also might have been a good thing to do, and also maybe show it on the feeds, but that's a whole other different discussion. Anyway, point is, I really like the twists we end up getting here. We find out the upgraded powers, and one by one, they each find out what happened, and we find out that Quinn has won the deep fake HOH, and it's a pretty massive power. Like, to say that this is a big power would honestly be an understatement. Essentially, to me, this just feels like they are doing, like, a reprieve of the invisible HOH again. They know that it didn't work last season, and it really wasn't what they were hoping for, and it feels like this is them trying to do it again, because this is a little bit different than what we got. Basically, Quinn has this power where in the first 4 weeks of the game, he has the power to basically infiltrate someone else's HOH, stripping them of all the power, naming these nominations, but the way they're doing it is kind of cool. There's this avatar of sorts, and it's going to look and sound exactly like the HOH, so they're not going to be able to detect who did it. I think this is a really good way to make sure that the invisible HOH stays invisible and doesn't end up just being the same person. I think this is a really cool power. I really want to see Quinn use it, and I feel like he's the right person to have it at this point. I think if there's anybody you are going to give this to, it is someone like Quinn. He's very game savvy at this point. He seems to have a real knack for the game and things like that, and I just feel like this could be one of the most interesting powers we've seen in a game in a while. I'm hoping this is not one of those seasons where you have these really great powers and then we never see what comes of them, because that tends to happen a lot when they do these powers early on in the game. I mean, I look at like Big Brother 20, Big Brother 21, there's so many powers that were given that weren't used at all, and I really hope that's not the case here, because I really like the idea of this one. And Makensy's, I don't really mind either. The America's Veto, definitely not nearly as powerful of an advantage, but I still think it's a cool one where essentially she vetoes somebody, and then she doesn't, the HOH doesn't get to pick the replacement nominee. She doesn't pick the replacement nominee. No, America chooses the replacement nominee, and I think that's a really cool idea, especially like thinking about the idea of like the person who uses it, they use it on themselves, you then get to nominate their closest ally, and like the whole week ends up going completely differently than expected. You could also, have a scenario where the HOH is aware of her power and kind of uses that against her. I mean, the possibilities are honestly kind of endless when it comes to this particular power. So I think it's also really cool. Not a great power for Makensy to have. It's like pretty straightforward, especially compared to Quinn's, which is way more powerful, but I still like them. And the twists also of what Ainsley is doing to the season, I was so nervous about. I had no idea how to really feel about what they were going to do with the HOH, what they were going to do with evictions, but I gotta say, I think if you're going to change up the format, this is kind of the best way to go about it, because it doesn't really change things all that much. Essentially, the HOH now, they're not putting up 2 nominees, they are instead putting up 3 nominees. We've seen this happen before, but we've never had an HOH have to make 3 nominations. Usually it's 2 nominations and then somebody else would put up the third one, but the idea the HOH now has to nominate 3 people, it makes it a lot more stressful to be HOH, and finding nominees and having a pawn and things like that. It really does change things up quite drastically, but in a way that's really interesting to watch. And then the really big thing here is that obviously, you have the veto, but then there's another chance for the 3 players remaining to save themselves in a competition called the AI Arena. One of the nominees then has a second chance, and then that brings that down to the standard 2, and I really like this a lot. I kind of talked about this a little bit on Twitter, but basically, I feel like when it comes to weeks in Big Brother, particularly like the first couple weeks, things tend to be pretty set in stone by like Saturday. You're pretty certain what's going to happen. You know how the week is going to turn out, and the rest of the week is kind of this, sometimes we'll get some good moments, but most of the time it is this slow crawl to the inevitable, and that tends to happen a lot in this game. And so I think implementing a comp where things are so much more uncertain and you literally cannot really discuss what is going to happen until literally right at eviction, I think is actually a really cool idea. Now, it could backfire. You could have a scenario where people don't really want to talk about the vote until you get to eviction night, and it becomes kind of boring where we don't know what's going to happen. But I really like the spontaneity of it all. I like the idea that you have a second veto. You could hypothetically change up the entire nom set just through that comp. You don't know who the actual target is. You could have a scenario where it's pretty certain who's going to leave, and then that person ends up winning. I mean, I think it's a really cool idea, and I think it's one of the better twists they've come up with. So I honestly don't hate it. Honestly, like, here's the thing, like, there's been twists I've liked at first, and then I hated it, and then, I liked it at first, and then as the weeks went on, I really hate it, but so far, I like this, so I like this one, and I think it actually can benefit the season in a way that some of the recent twists kind of haven't. So I honestly don't have too many complaints when it comes to what Ainsley decided to add to the game this week. Obviously, I don't think this is going to last the entire season. They tend to do these twists, like, really just, like, the first couple weeks of the game. So I assume this will be a pre-jury thing, and then maybe jury will pivot to something else. But I think this honestly kind of works. I don't really have a problem with this at all. It doesn't drastically change things up to the point where it doesn't feel like Big Brother. It does feel like Big Brother, but it's a lot harder to be HOH, and it also is a lot easier to win a comp, and also kind of changes up the way you strategize when it comes to discussing votes and things like that, and I think makes the week overall a lot more exciting, not knowing, because it's a lot more results oriented. Like, if this happens, then we do this. If this happens, but if that doesn't happen, then we're going back to this. Like, I think there's a lot of interesting ideas here, and I think, honestly, if you're going to find a way to throw a wrench into the game, this is probably one of the better ways to go about it. So yeah, so far, I don't hate this. I mean, talk to me in a couple weeks and that might change, but so far, honestly, I feel pretty good about this twist for the most part. I also somehow left out, but I'm honestly really liking the way they're implementing the AI theme so far. I think they're doing a good job at finding a way to include things, but not have it feel like it is overshadowing the rest of the show. The intro as well, I never talked about the intro, but I actually think the intro this season is the best intro they've done in years, because one, it sticks to the theme, two, it's just really creative and colorful and shit, and I just really like it a lot. So yeah, again, the thing that I was like most worried about is actually delivering quite in quite a big way for me so far. I also once again have to talk about just how happy so far I am with the comps this season, which I know is insane, but it really does feel like, at least right now, they saw what worked in reindeer games, and they're actually trying to make an effort to stick to that, and realizing how much more interesting the show can be when you actually have comps that literally anybody can win. And the comp they have for this especially is easily, I think, one of the most innovative and interesting in a very long time, which is shocking because Big Brother tends to reuse the same comps over and over again, but this, to my knowledge, is not something they have done before. Basically, it's this comp that basically is called New Rule. Every single round, Ainsley implements a new rule in the game of sorts. First round, they had to like find like a team of players, like a team of 3 players, and then whoever didn't would be eliminated, in which case that was Tucker and Makensy. Round 2, it basically becomes shuffleboard, where like the winning team then eliminates any other team, which was Joseph, Quinn, and Kenny, which was Brooklyn, Rubina, and Kimo. They end up being eliminated. Round 3, they're competing against their own teammates, and it then leads to a very surprising trio of Kenny, Angela, and Leah being the last 3 that are standing. So again, you see how much more interesting this is. Like, if this was an overly physical comp, we know that it would be like Cam, Matt, and like, I don't know, like maybe throw like a Tucker in there. Like, it would be the 3 of them like battling it out. Maybe you could throw a potential like Makensy or someone in there as well. But because of the fact that, again, it is so incredibly random, it is so much more interesting to watch. And ultimately, it leads down to this really exciting final 3 in which Angela ends up becoming the new HOH and really just setting the tone for how this week is going to turn out. We also get to see Cedric and Chelsie as mascots throughout, not just this comp, but basically the entire week. Anytime they participate in something, they're dressed as like these huge like software chips. I thought it was kind of cool. I like the costume. I think it's one of the better ideas they've had. So again, it's yet another thing that normally I'm very negative about that I think they are still maintaining. I hope that this remains to be the case for the season, because so far at least we have not seen an overly physical comp. I know we're probably eventually going to, but it's just really great that so far they really have taken the criticisms of last season and actually are making an effort to do something about it. It is a great example of finally figuring out how to run a comp that doesn't cater towards a certain demographic, and how much more interesting the results can be, and how much more interesting the game is as a result. I think that is something that they've really struggled with for seasons, which is, and it's kind of crazy how literally all you have to do is, implement comps that are fair and for everybody. And I think this is just a perfect example of that. So I really hope they keep at it, because I'm generally enjoying the comps they're doing this season so far. And this is the thing that just makes me so happy to see them, start to add comps that are a lot more equal for everybody, is that we are able to get something like this where someone as unexpected, I think the person that we least suspected would win some kind of, challenge is someone like Angela. But because of the fact that it was such a fair competition in that way, she is able to achieve this win and gives us such a exciting week to watch. Like, imagine if this was like a Matt or like a Cam HOH or something, and how just overly boring it would be, because it would be so straightforward in that way. You'd put up Kenny and Angela and things like that. Like, that's typically what we would see in a Big Brother season. It's just really great to see them actually try to do something to improve the game and make it a lot more exciting. And I just hope that they're able to continue this, because I think, honestly, from a comm perspective, they kind of do have it locked down in terms of what to really do to keep things exciting throughout the entire time. I think something they really struggled with last season is they had a cast that was skewing older, but they mostly had comps that didn't benefit them. So because of that, you had people like Cam and Jag and Matt that were kind of just able to run the table the entire season and not really have a lot of adversity as a result until they ended up being targeted and things like that. And I think a big reason for that is because of just the comps being so similar in that way. So I like that this season things are moving in the other direction, where so far almost all of the comps have either been mental or social or strategic in some way. And I can only hope that continues to be the case. I'm not saying eliminate physical comps entirely. I know they got to be in there. But I like this season they have a clear emphasis on, much more social and on much more mental and, again, just much more mental and equal comps. I think it makes for such more interesting and exciting results as the case, I think it just makes things so much more interesting and exciting as a result. So the rest of the episode obviously is pretty much seeing what nominees Angela's going to make. She immediately is, very cognizant of the fact that Kenny is this big competitive threat. It was between the two of them, and she feels like as a result, he's going to be a very easy nom. She talks to Chelsie, Joseph, and Cedric a bit, and she kind of wants to make this alliance with them and T-Core, and Chelsie, again, just really over the moon about the fact that she's just handed yet another alliance on a silver platter, and it's because of her really good social game and how well she is connecting with everybody. And we get this moment where she Joseph is also feeling really good about this alliance and things like that, and it seems like they are going to make it. She also pulls in Quinn, who talks to her about he's a super fan and also lets her know about his power. We'll see if that ends up working out, but he does let her in about that. So immediately she seems to have some pretty solid connections. It does seem like at this point she is planning to nominate Kenny, but she's really unsure who the others should be. She then meets with multiple house guests. They tell her how little trust they have towards Lisa, which makes her feel like, all right, she's probably going to end up putting her. And then she also tries to clear the air with Matt, because she finds out that Matt, Matt, meanwhile, is scrambling. He is so convinced at this point that he is going to be put up. He thinks that Angela is after him, and, he's so worried that that's going to happen. Literally in front of the entire house, he is talking about how he thinks he's going to be, like, this big target and things like that, which it's like, literally, you're doing everything to put the target on you. Like, if you are constantly going to people and saying, I'm going to be a target this week, I'm going to be a target this week, that just gives them more ammo to put you up. Like, you need to try to, really be careful who you tell that to, because if word gets out, eventually you will find yourself being the target, even if you weren't meant to be one in the first place. And I think that Matt just doesn't quite understand that. But Angela does take this opportunity to try to clear the air with him, and it seems like it's going to go really well. She talks about how she didn't mean to cause any shadiness. She actually was really just trying to hype him up. She really wants to work with him. But then he mentions that, he's going to be fine if she put him up. And this makes her start to feel very uneasy about him, thinking that he's going to be the next to go if she puts him up. So it does seem like there's a possibility, but she doesn't end up doing it quite yet. Instead, she does the nominations and does put up Lisa and Kenny, but then also nominates Kimo as a pawn. And it should be noted, she does not talk to any of them about these nominations. So she doesn't consult them, doesn't let them know they're going to be on the block, just puts them up and just kind of says fuck it, and plans to go after Kenny with Kimo being her pawn, and we'll see how that ends up working out. But that's kind of where we leave things at when it comes to the episode. Now, before I talk about Wednesday, I'm going to try to implement something new into these reviews that I didn't do before I, shifted to doing the podcast and things like that. And that is, it's basically talking about what wasn't shown in this episode, because I feel like this happens a lot in Big Brother. There's something really impactful that happens throughout the week, and we all end up talking about it, on the feeds and things like that, and we're all just freaking out that it ended up happening, and then they don't even end up showing it in the episode, and we get a very inaccurate retelling of events. And if you have to ask me right now, what is the main thing that I think makes the edit this season wildly inaccurate, and why I am not a huge fan of the way that they portrayed things between Angela and Matt, it is because of the fact that throughout this entire week, they try to make it very black and white. They make it seem like Angela is the villain in this story and Matt is the hero, when I think it would have been so much more interesting if they would have shown that Matt actually is just as messy, and Matt did a lot to really put himself in this position, especially because they didn't show this, and I can't believe they didn't. The first day of feeds that we ended up seeing mainly consisted of Matt going from person to person and just letting them know basically everything about his game. Any deal that he made, any a conversation he had, all of that was just put out on the table for anyone to do anything with, and it's really not a shock that he ended up in the position that he did, particularly this final two he made with Tucker, which they did not show in the episode, and I really think they should have, because it ends up being a very crucial part of the week. He made this final two with Tucker, and I guess he was just so, jazzed about it that he felt the need to literally tell everybody, and it really just ended up making things so much worse on himself, because nobody really could trust Matt with information as a result. And so, again, I think if they really took the time to just show that Matt was overplaying and that he was just ratting out everything to everybody, I just think this would have been a lot more interesting to watch. It wouldn't feel like Angela was just doing this out of pure delusion. She actually did have reasons for thinking Matt was coming after her, and a big part of it also was because Makensy openly on the feeds was telling people that she wanted Angela out despite her being the HOH, and she got word of this from Joseph and Chelsie. So yeah, it's just, I'm honestly surprised that they didn't show this, especially, and what's so weird to me is that they give Matt this edit throughout the entire week, but yet Matt is the person that is most likely to end up on the block and going home this week, so the fact that they are giving him this edit is just really strange to me. I don't really understand why I decided to go about it. I really can only believe that Big Brother only knows how to edit people as either truly good or truly bad. They don't know anything about the gray areas, whereas if they did that this week, I think it would have just made things that much more exciting. With that said, it's something I really wish they showed, but let's just go ahead and get into the craziness that was Wednesday's episode. Because in spite of all of that, I was honestly very impressed with the way they went about editing this episode. I think there were just so many fun moments here and just so many things that we love getting to see in a Big Brother episode. I think they did such a great job with. When it comes to Angela, I think for the most part, they edited this pretty correctly. She feels like she has very few connections with her nominations, and, people are understandably upset. Kimo especially is very disheartened to be on the block. It's reminding him of a lot of stuff. He talks about how it reminds him stuff he had to deal with as a child and things like that, with him being gay and struggling with money and kind of being this outsider of sorts. And it really does make you feel for Kimo in the situation. I really don't understand why she didn't go to him and just tell him that he's going to be a pawn. I feel like just give him that reassurance. Maybe he doesn't want to do it, but I think if she at least had consulted him about it, I think it would have turned out a lot better. But easily the person that is the most blindsided is Lisa. She feels like she built all these genuine connections, and instead she just is really upset about, she doesn't like that she didn't pull her aside. And, Angela talks about it, she wants to see her as a friend in the game, but Lisa thinks that doesn't really matter. She doesn't see her as an ally, and that's all that really matters to her. She wants to go hard in this veto, and I don't blame Lisa in this scenario, but again, every conversation that Lisa has, she just makes things so much worse for herself, just having this innate ability to turn people further and further against her, and this is just a perfect example of that. But at the same time, like I said, I don't blame her for being mad at Angela. I do blame her for the way that she goes about it, which, is pretty much just terrible on every possible level. But the big thing with Angela here is that, she talks about how much love she's getting from all the house guests, except from Matt. Matt does not give her a hug, and this outrages Angela. She doesn't understand why he hasn't acknowledged her, why he hasn't come to her about, not going on the block and things like that, which I do agree. I think he should have at least pulled her aside and said, hey, I want to work with you, because he keeps talking about that throughout the entire week, that, he wanted to work with Angela, but he never really tried to do that. There is a moment that they absolutely should have shown, that I will talk about, but he never, but prior to everything that happens, he never really tried to make her feel any better. But again, a lot of this is due to Chelsie and Joseph's work and just how well they've done in getting her to turn fully against him. She feels like he's playing very hard and talks about these constant crazy eyes that he has and things like that. Aside from that, the other thing that really prompts her to eventually have this whole thing that ends up going down is the Collective, this alliance that was discussed in Sunday's episode with Joseph, T-Core, Chelsie, and Cedric. They're all getting along. They want to pull Angela in and also add Kimo as a number, Quinn and Cam as well. And they're going to make this group called the Collective, which in any other season ends up running the entire game and probably has very little bumps in the road as a result, or at least it seemed like that's what was going to happen. But Angela doesn't really feel like this is something that is legitimate. She's very nervous about this. She doesn't feel like they are being sincere with her. She just immediately feels that she can't trust them. And, she tries to do this thing where, like, she's hiding it and she makes it seem like she loves it, but deep down, she just doesn't believe anything that they are saying. And this is easily her biggest issue in the game, is that she just isn't able to trust anybody. She's never able to take anyone's word and just fully believe them. Now, I will say, in social strategy games, you never should take anyone's word as gospel. You always should have some doubt in there, but you also need to have some allies that you just have some faith in. You need to at least have the belief that maybe they're telling you the truth. Even if you don't believe it, you need to not immediately act on the idea that they do not trust you, and that's exactly what Angela ends up doing here. We see this moment late at night where everyone's asleep. She's like recounting all these different things to herself, talking about how she wants to expose Matt, she wants to crucify him and things like that. And we get to the next morning. There's this slow clap of where everyone, it's like 8 a.m. Everyone's just like, ready to just like vibe and eat breakfast or whatever. Angela starts off doing this slow clap that everyone joins in. They think it's going to be this like, really fun group activity. And it quickly devolves into what is hands down one of the most legendary speeches I think we have ever seen in the history of Big Brother. I mean, I think this is a speech we're going to be going back to seasons from now. It is absolutely in that pantheon of just the kind of iconic moments that we automatically think of when we think of Big Brother. I think it's going to be moments like this. And I know that there is a subsection of people who felt that Angela went too far and thought that she, threw some personal digs at Matt that weren't necessary. But I mean, pretty much all of it was game related. Everything she says in this speech is something that she in her mind has conjured up. She is so convinced that Matt is coming after her, and she talks about his positioning within the house and just how great he is at the game and things like that. And, there's a moment where she also talks about the Collective, and, or as she calls them, the visitors who went to see her, and that their performance, how great it was for like a low budget movie and things like that. I mean, just so many iconic lines here, but it all culminates in Matt bringing up his mom. I want you to remember that Matt is the one who brought up his mom here, watching the show with her, and Angela basically saying that she hopes that she does, just to see how much of a brat that he really is and bring up how much better Makensy could do. I mean, again, I think this was just such a fun moment. The fact that it happened at 8 a.m. Big Brother time, when most of the time there isn't really much of anything happening. It was so out of nowhere, but also the fact that this was like a legitimately like rehearsed speech. Like, she put effort into this. This was not off the cuff. This was something that she was thinking in her head entirely. The previous night, she had barely gotten any sleep. I mean, again, I think this is just Big Brother at its finest, getting to see house guests just completely lose their shit on another with very little evidence of such, aside from their own reality that they have created in their head. I mean, I just think that's Big Brother to a core, and I just really loved getting to see this moment. Matt, of course, is just utterly confused here by what's going on, really doesn't do a good job of trying to help himself. He's pretty positive at this point that he's going to be going up and that he's probably going to be out of, but he also is convinced that he's going to secure his own safety. You have Quinn, who's just so shocked at what's going on that they're all lying because they want her on, they really do want her on their side and things like that. All of them really do. And you can just see how just befuddled he is by what's going on. And then having it all end with Joseph saying that he's positive that this is going to make the episode episode. Again, just such an amazing moment. I love the way this all turned out, and I really couldn't have asked them for them to edit this any better. No, we didn't get the full 10 minutes of the speech, but I think we got all the important things, you know, whether, like I said, it has like these big intense eyes and things like that, and, you know, talking about his potential showmance with Makensy and things like that. I mean, again, just everything was so on point here, despite the fact that a lot of it was just completely her own delusions. I just thought this was so much fun to watch, and honestly, like, again, I know there is a group of people that have had issues with this, but I really don't think Big Brother is the show to watch if this is the thing that is going to offend you when there is so much worse stuff that happens every single season. This, in comparison, was completely harmless and absolutely what we want to see in Big Brother. More of this and less of what we typically get. I feel like there's been a lot of seasons lately where people just haven't wanted to fight, and people have just kind of like just let things happen. Seeing Angela just go off at the slightest thing is just so much fun to watch. She's such an unpredictable house guest, and I feel like this is just a perfect example as to why. So I really just loved everything about this and how they end up editing this overall. Oh my god, how could I also mention that the entire time she is giving this speech, she is acting like she is the one that is in danger, despite the fact that she's literally HOH. Again, just amazing stuff all around. Exactly the kind of stuff we need to see more of in Big Brother. It was also revealed recently that Angela apparently was on, like, Dr. Phil and a bunch of other game shows, and yeah, it very much tracks. She has that sort of, like, crackhead type energy, and it's just really fun to watch. It's exactly why we need to keep casting like older house guests like this onto not just Big Brother but reality television in general, because they almost always end up delivering, and Angela is just is just continuing to show. Now, what I don't love here is how they decide to edit Matt's in this episode, because instead of them taking this approach of him being so convinced that he's gonna be fine and, you know, that she has no power against him, kind of really igniting this rivalry, they instead try to give him this, like, really sympathetic edit that was just so incredibly cringy to me. I didn't really like anything they did regarding this part of the episode. The way they decided to portray him, I just was not on board with at all here. It felt so, like, I get it that Matt was bothered by what was going on, but again, I don't understand why you are editing him in this way when he's probably going to end up going, and it's also not like he didn't do anything to get himself into this position, because he absolutely did. He cries about how he's sad that his mom had to see this and things like that, and how she made it all personal, even though, again, I want to reiterate, he is the one that brought it up in the first place. If he had never said that my mom is going to be, my mom is going to be watching this, she would have never said what she said in the first place. Again, this was like the one part of the episode I just really was not on board with at all. I don't really understand why they decided to go about the edit in this way. Again, I think Big Brother, they want to portray things in such a binary manner where everyone has to be either a victim or they are the person that is the perpetrator. There really is no in between here, when again, I think it would have just been so much more interesting to just show how delusional both of them were, and I think that would have been such a more exciting edit, but them going about it this way really did not work for me. And him, like, moping around and crying to, like, Brooklyn and Cam and Kenny and Makensy, like, sure, yes, I like the fact that they comfort him in this moment, but it doesn't change the fact that I just feel like the edit really was just villainizing Angela in a way that they didn't really need to. I think it was kind of ridiculous they went about this, and I don't understand why we spend so much time focusing on his side of things. Meanwhile, we're trying to villainize Angela and make her seem like this terrible person, and that this really just came out of nowhere. I just thought this entire thing was so unnecessary, the way they decided to put this together. We do get some content with Matt in this episode that is definitely worth looking into. He forms this trio of sorts with Makensy and Leah. They call themselves the Thromance, and it seems like that is potentially going to be a thing. Leah is so difficult to read also as a player, because on one hand, it seems like she has, like, inroads with a lot of people, but yet she wants to gravitate towards those that are basically basically in the worst positioning in the game. She's really close with Makensy and Matt. She seems to be pretty close with Kenny, who we'll get to him a little bit later. I definitely have some things to say about him. And then they don't show in the episode, but she also was very close with Lisa. So she's someone that like I really want to root for in this game. I think she's just a lot of fun to watch, but her game savviness and her, reads on the game, it just isn't really there as much as I was hoping for, and I hope that she's able to improve, but right now, I'm just not really a huge fan of it. But we do get to the veto competition where Joseph and Brooklyn are picked to play, and it ends up being another comp that we haven't seen in a very long time, but it is the Big Brother spelling comp, and again, another equitable comp, which is great to see. This comp also, it should be noted, has not made an appearance in Big Brother since literally Big Brother 18. It did return briefly in like Celebrity Big Brother 1, but we legitimately have not seen this comp in Big Brother proper since Big Brother 18, which is insane to me because it used to be like a staple of the first week of the game. I remember when I was first covering this show on doing reviews and things like that, almost every single first week was the spelling challenge, and then they just kind of deviate away from that when they started to focus more on physical comps. And again, this is a good sign. This really makes me feel like they are starting to pivot away from that and remember the comps that really made Big Brother what it is. And I thought this was a really fun challenge overall, but also was like a really clean sweep. Like there really is no competition here. Lisa does end up winning the veto. Pretty impressive win, like I said, but also admittedly not a lot of competition going on. So not a ton to say about it, but overall I did enjoy getting to see this comp. What I did not enjoy is so much of this episode, aside from Matt moping around, also consists of this budding potential showmance between Makensy and Matt, which was just so incredibly tired and cheesy to me. I didn't like anything that they were doing here. Big Brother seems to always want to focus a lot on these showman segments, and this is perhaps the most blatant example of just how desperate they are for there to be one, because everything about this just reeked of them trying to get you to latch onto something that probably isn't even going to be that relevant by the end of the week because Matt is in such a shitty position. That's the other thing. I don't even understand why they decided to devote so much of not just this episode, but the next 2 episodes to these moments between these two, because one, Matt is pretty much on his way out. 2, it's pretty clear to me, or at least it seems like it, maybe it's because I've been, watching and listening to feed updates and things like that, that Makensy is not really into this in the way that Matt is. He clearly wants to do something, he clearly is into this and he really wants to, go for it, but she's really unsure what to make of it. I don't know, the whole thing was just so incredibly schmaltzy to me. I don't know why they decided to spend so much time on it. There's a moment where she talks about potentially using the power on him, but she ultimately doesn't, and we go literally right into the veto ceremony. Like, there's very little time devoted to things, and I'll talk about why that's kind of egregious in a little bit. But Lisa does use the veto on herself, and then Angela does obviously renom Matt in her place. But again, we got to talk about the things that we didn't see, because I think out of the 3 episodes that aired this week, this is easily the one where when I heard about what they didn't show, I was the most outraged, because while I'm really happy with the way they covered the fight, everything after that, I don't think they really properly showcased, like, how it really went down. There's a lot of things I think they could have showed a lot differently. The first big thing to talk about here is they really put a lot of emphasis on the collective and how this was something that was really going to be a thing in the game, but pretty much from the beginning, it was never really a solidified alliance. It was kind of something that only Angela wanted to do. She was so convinced that, like, they had to make this alliance happen, but it never really seemed like anyone was actually that for it. Yes, Quinn did come up with the name, but pretty much after Angela's meltdown, it kind of just crumbled, so I don't really know why they decided to put so much focus. I mean, they kind of had to because of her meltdown, but the way they portrayed it, I think they could have shown that this wasn't really a actual alliance to the majority of people within it. And I think that's something that we needed to see more of. I already talked about how Angela's rivalry with Matt is not just like him not hugging her. There's other things that went down. But the biggest thing that they left out of this episode that really just kind of pisses me off is that there's actually her decision to put up Matt on the block is not nearly as straightforward as the episode made it seem. In fact, there was a lot of chaos leading up to that decision where after the veto win, she had this 5 to 6 hour conversation with Matt. I don't know. It was a really elongated and kind of just unsufferable conversation because it just went on and on forever. And it seemed like they were in this agreement where they were going to bury the hatchet. She ended up kind of apologizing to him and things like that. And he basically told her as much, that he wasn't sure if he was going to not put her on the block next week if he was to win HOH, but he did kind of suggest 2 potential replacement nominees. He did bring up Tikor. He did bring up Tucker, which is a really weird one considering that he made a final 2 with him, but again, Matt isn't really the most logical when it comes to his decisions. And then he also wanted her to put up Tikor because in his mind, she is quieter, she's not doing much, and nobody's really going to care if she goes on the block. And basically Angela was straight up lying to him about her doing it, but she did start to genuinely consider it. And there was a moment where it seemed like she was this close to putting Tikor on the block, when the only reason she was going to do that is not because of what Matt said. It was because immediately after this conversation, she saw Matt, Cam, and Tikor in a room together, assumed that they were trying to basically convince her to volunteer for the block, and Angela felt that because she's now volunteered, she had no choice, even though she never once talked to Tikor about this and tried to get a straight answer as to whether or not that was the case. But that's Angela for you as a player. Her delusions are the only her delusions are her delusions, and that's just kind of how she plays the game, and it's honestly really fun to watch. But yeah, I mean, there was, like I said, a moment of time where it really did seem like she was about to make the worst possible move for her game and put up somebody who generally wanted to work with her and had no incentive to go up on the block whatsoever, had no idea what was even happening. In fact, she did not even find out that this was an option until way later in the week, even though Kimo was aware of what was happening and is kind of supposed to be her closest ally, but didn't clue her in on the fact that she almost was going on the block, and it was so close to happening, but Tucker was the one to talk Angela out of it and basically kind of remind her of what was going to happen, especially the fact that Matt wanted him to be a replacement nominee. He was really annoyed about that, and he reeled Angela in, he got her to refocus, and that is ultimately what made her come to the decision to put a Matt. And again, I mean, I'm just thinking about how much fun of an edit this could have been. We really could have, again, played more into just Angela coming up with the most wild theories and her just kind of, continuing to make all these crazy moves and everyone not being able to keep up with it. We could have had this great diary room with Tucker, with him talking about how he needed to kind of reel her in. But no, instead we're going to devote all this time to getting you to feel bad for Matt and all this endless showman's nonsense with Makensy and Matt, and so much of that time could have instead had been dedicated to just seeing how chaotic things were leading up to the veto ceremony. And it honestly is baffling to me that they decided not to show, but it shows where Big Brother's priorities are. They don't really care about the strategy talks. They care way more about just comps and all this other nonsense that doesn't really matter. So yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of things that they did. There's a lot of things they did portray right, but this is the thing that I just don't understand why they didn't show up, especially because it really just makes it seem so much more simplified. It makes it seem like Angela only went for Matt based solely on her assumptions when there were reasons why she put him up, and then also almost didn't. I think it just would have been so much more interesting, and this is exactly what I'm saying with them trying to make Matt a hero and her a villain. Instead, showing how delusional and just how just how constantly paranoid she is, and how that is always coming into conflict with her game, I think just would have been such a more interesting edit. But instead they gave her just such a straightforward sort of overly villainous one, and I just really wasn't here for it at all, because so much of what Angela does, like I said, is just based on her own paranoia and delusions with not really a lot of evidence to back it up. And I think this would have been one of the best examples of just how kind of overly chaotic of a week this ended up being, when the result was, even when the result was so straightforward, she still was wavering and almost made an even worse decision for herself. I just think that would have been so much fun to watch. Don't show the showman stuff, don't show Matt doing whatever, but you know, that's Big Brother for you. I'm not going to harp on it too much, but it easily, if you had to ask me right now, what is the thing you are the most annoyed that they really didn't show, it is definitely this, because I think not only would it have been really interesting to watch, but it would have made the episode, I think, that much more satisfying, seeing her have this huge blow up on Matt and then almost consider not putting him up just based on assumptions. I think just would have been really fun to watch. Alright, so with all of that said, and me no longer going on that tangent, even though, again, I'm so frustrated they didn't fucking show it, that moment, because it would have been so much fun, let's talk about Thursday's episode, because what we essentially get here is a really weird episode to talk about. Half of it is almost completely fictional. Everything they show in the beginning of this episode with Matt and him trying to rally people to vote for him, aside from Lisa, is not really how it ends up going down, but that's basically what the first half of this episode was. But then the second half of this episode, I mean, it just really makes me that much happier about the idea of the AI arena, and I think, you know, if this is what we're going to get moving forward, I feel very good with how this twist is going to turn out. But let's talk about some things to, you know, that do happen beforehand. The main thing to really discuss right now is this alliance of sorts that Matt ends up forming called the Barbershop. He decides to pull in basically everybody that he thinks is voting for him, which is Brooklyn, Cedric, Rubina, Chelsie, Leah, Cam, and Makensy. He's pretty confident that they are going to be his votes this week, and well, we'll talk about how, of course, that ends up going down. We get this moment with Kimo where he talks about everyone being very non-committal because of how the AI arena twist is going to happen. But the big moment on Thursday is yet another blow-up from Angela when it comes to regarding Kenny, who she really wants to beat Matt in this AI arena. She feels like he has this on lock. He can absolutely, you know, he's shown that he's this comp beast before, really trying to hype him up, and instead of him talking, you know, taking this as an opportunity to try to work with her and try to maybe find some kind of common ground and kind of get them to go from, you know, someone she wanted to target and now actually try to connect with her, he instead is outraged about this and says that he has no desire to do so because he's so close with Matt and he sees them as this really close duo and things like that. Mind you, it's week one, first of all. Like, it's literally the first week of the game. I understand that you've had all these conversations with Matt and Makensy and Leah, but the fact remains, it is the first week of the game, and very little of what has happened is probably going to end up being, you know, very little of how things have played out is probably going to be what you end up doing the rest of the game. So the fact that he immediately is trying to say that Matt leaving is basically the end of his game is ridiculous, but then he doubles down on it, saying that, like, he doesn't want to, you know, that he doesn't really want to put in effort. It's just kind of a game for him. He sees Matt as, like, you know, Matt is someone that he cares for. Angela correctly clocks him on this and says, you know, goes off on him and just talks about how he's, like, throwing it away because he doesn't and because she doesn't want Matt to have the satisfaction of putting her up next week, and that he really doesn't want it as bad. And I would contend with that, because everything we've seen with Kenny in the game so far has been almost completely nothing. I mean, I saw a conversation between him and Leah where he was talking about being like an older house guest and things like that, and how he's really struggling to connect with people, but I don't really buy that because the man hasn't really put effort in with anybody that isn't Leah, Matt, Makensy, or even Lisa. Those are really the only people he has made an effort to bond with. Everybody else, he's just decided he isn't going to get along with, and he isn't going to end up connecting well with. So because of that, he's just kind of checking out of the game, and it is so disappointing to see. Look, I already was not high on Kenny based on things he said preseason, but just the lack of effort that he is putting into the game, the lack of, the lack of any sort of confidence that, the lack of any sort of motivation he has to continue, and how he is so focused on wanting to leave, it just is so disheartening to see, because there's so many people that apply for this game that it would literally mean everything to them to be, have the chance to play this game and, play it at their hardest and really just put their fullest into it. To see somebody like Kenny, who is literally only on this show because Big Brother, at least what he said preseason, Big Brother is the show that made him and his wife end up together, essentially, just really ends up pissing me off, because it just seems like he really doesn't care about this game at all. Yes, I get it, you've bonded with Matt, but again, it's week 1, you're not even trying to fight for yourself. It's just pathetic. Like, there's really no other way to look at it other than it's pathetic. He's known this guy for a week. I think Quinn honestly said it perfectly with just how ridiculous it really is. And again, I just think it's insane that he would have this conversation with her and not take this as she is trying to help him. She wants to work with him. She wants him to be safe and for him to survive the week and beat Matt. You would think that this would make him turn around on Angela, that, oh, she wants to work with me, but instead he's feeling attacked because she doesn't have a right to tell him not to throw the comp, which, like, no, she doesn't, but, like, why would you want to do that? Like, I just don't understand anything about what Kenny does this week. If he didn't want to apply for the game, he shouldn't have been there. And if he wanted to leave, he should have just left. He should have just left. Like, don't tell people to vote for you just because you have this desire in you to leave. Just leave. Like, straight up, if you're not going to campaign, there's no reason to be here. And it's just so incredibly frustrating to watch, to see all of that go down. Like I said, I already was not high on Kenny, but this made me go from someone that I thought I was really going to dislike in the house because of things he says, to someone I dislike because he's really not giving much of anything in terms of energy, and just is almost a complete waste of space at this point with just how little he is providing and how much he really even and how little he even wants to provide. It's just so frustrating to watch. And I really don't blame anybody, Angela, Quinn, I don't blame anybody in this conversation for going off on him in the way it did, because it was just so pathetic to watch. But then we get to the stuff that I'm really excited to talk about, the AI arena. Again, I just am really pleased with how they decided to go about this twist, because again, it is an equitable comp. This is not something that is in any way physical. It's one of those where basically they're seeing a series of videos and there's like multiple copies of each house guest, and they have to try to identify which one has the most tiles and things like that. And basically they have to, figure out which one has the most tiles in their image, and they only have like 2 minutes to lock it in. And ultimately, really not a competition at all. Kimo is the only one to guess this correctly, with Quinn being there 19 times. So he's now won the AI arena. He's off the block, and this was easily the best case scenario, not just because I really just wanted to see Matt and Kenny on the block, but also because I just think that Kimo it also is just such a perfect example of why equitable comps are so great to see. I think if this was a physical comp, Matt obviously has the upper hand here, and Kenny is someone who also might have done really well, but instead Kimo wins this in pretty much a landslide, and we then get probably one of the best reactions of the house guests that we've seen in a very long time. It was reminding me of the opposite of when, like, Cam won the veto last season. Everyone was like disheartened. Here, everyone is just thrilled. They're so happy that Kimo won, but also I think very happy that they get to evict Matt. I think some of this was excitement for Kimo. I think a good, like, at least 85% of it, maybe even 90, was the fact that they are getting to evict Matt, and he's probably going to go. This was just such a great moment to see. I love seeing Makensy being the only one that is upset about this. Everybody else is just freaking out and just so excited with what's going down. And so, again, I thought just all of this was really great to see. The only part that didn't really work for me here is Julie, for some reason, has them, like, sit there for, like, a solid, like, 2 minutes to, like, campaign, and I don't understand why they decided to go about showcasing in this way. I think this was easily, like, the time to just cut to commercial. Like, let's just see them, like, take some time to quickly strategize and things like that. I think they were trying to, like, recapture the magic of a double eviction, but that doesn't really work here when this isn't about let's figure out who to put up. It's more so like, who are we voting out between Matt and Kenny? That's like a 30-second conversation. There isn't really a lot to showcase here. So I think this is the one part that they really just need to work on. It felt like they weren't fully prepared with how to go about editing this part for how to go about structuring this part of the episode. And I think what they need to do in future weeks is just cut to commercial, come back when it's time to vote, because the way it was done was just so incredibly awkward. You had them both just kind of standing there, not wanting to campaign against each other. There was a point where Matt was, like, giving a speech and Julie, like, cut him off and things like that. It was just so weirdly put together, but we do get to their speeches. Nothing really to ring home about here. Kenny is pretty convinced he's going. The funny part is that, like, Kenny in this speech is convinced that, like, he's going and they're all about to vote him out, whereas Matt is convinced that he's staying and is trying to do what he can to show them why he should. But we get to the live eviction, and it honestly ends with a very interesting vote, because basically everybody here ends up voting out Matt except for Lisa, Leah, and Makensy. So it ends up being a vote of 8-3. And some things to note here. We do see this moment from Quinn where while he votes, he also quotes Corey's line of "beat you, Zach." So I don't know if that's going to be a trend moving forward, but as someone who just really loves the ongoing, like, rivalry that Zach Wurtenberger has against people who shout him out in episodes, I really want to see this continue to go down, because I think it's just a really fun, like, recurring sort of meta gag that, like, if you know the context of, I think it's just really funny to watch. So that was great that Quinn did that. And then you have Joseph, who not only gives this great moment of saying, like, we're not going to make this like every other season, which is great to see, but also nearly misses the eviction vote because he doesn't realize he's the last to vote and, like, sprints in there when she's about to read the vote. But yes, Matt does end up going. But we then get to Matt's exit interview, and there's a lot of things here that I was just kind of annoyed by. He's talking a lot about how he wanted to represent his Filipino ethnicity, and Julie feels the need to tell the entire audience what he's talking about when it's so obvious what he's saying, when he's like, I'm here for a greater purpose and things like that. And it's like, Julie, it's obvious what he's talking about. You don't need to spell it out for the audience. I feel like Julie is just convinced that we're stupid and we need reminders every 20 seconds. There was even a moment where, like, Lisa said, my vote is for Kimo, but because she didn't say it exactly the way that she was supposed to, Julie had to, like, clarify that that's that she was voting for Kenny. Like, it was just really weird the way that's going on. It just seemed like she felt the need to reassure that we knew what he was talking about and things like that. He talks about him and Makensy and how he feels their story isn't over and that they're going to build something out of the house. He does, I will say, and this is what I have liked about Matt postseason, is that he did do a good job of talking about Angela and how she just kind of misread him, and that he actually did want to work with her and really just kind of making light about it, which is what should be doing. We should not be having calls to CBS to remove Angela because she called Matt crazy eyes and things like that. It's absolutely absurd to me. And the fact that people are doing that and they're going on, like, her, like, you know, realtor site and trying to get her fired. It's like, there have been so many people in this show that have done far worse things, and the fact that this is the thing that is moving the goalpost for you to take action is just absolutely insane to me. And I think just we really need to have a serious conversation if this is the thing that is going to rile you up, and not the dozens of microaggressions and racist and misogynistic and sexist and just deplorable behavior that goes on almost every single season that has sometimes gone completely unnoticed by a certain subsection of people. Sometimes they're even, of which they are even fans of in that subsection of people. But again, that's a whole other different discussion. Matt, let's talk about him. Here's the thing with Matt, is that I think that he came into this game in a very interesting spot, because if he is on another season that is very alliance heavy and is, there's a lot of physical comps that is skewed to his archetype and things like that, I feel like Matt is someone who goes usually relatively far in games, and that's the type of player that he ends up being. Like I said, he's socially ingrained with everybody and things like that, but there's two things that brought that down. One, this is an extremely fluid cast to where literally even by the end of this week, there is no actual power structure. Everyone is so non-committal about where they want to go, and so Matt kind of has a hard time finding his way in there too. He's kind of terrible at the game. Like I said, he is so just loose lips about everything. Nothing really stays with him. He kind of just rats out everything to everybody, even when it doesn't even benefit him to do so. If he makes a deal with somebody, he's going to tell somebody about it immediately. But he also, throughout the entire week, is so convinced that he's going to be fine and that he has people on his side. And he never starts to question whether or not he actually is the target, because he's so convinced that people are just going to rally behind him no matter what. So, again, I think his naivety is absolutely what got him into this spot. But it also is the fact that you have somebody like an Angela who's HOH and is so incredibly vocal about what she wants and doesn't try to, play safe in her nominations at all. I think this was definitely a real risk for her. I don't necessarily think it was the greatest move for her, but I think that's why Matt ultimately did not end up doing all that well. I honestly figured that if he didn't leave this week, he was probably going to leave in the next couple weeks, but he did provide us some really good entertainment. I love, the stuff in the storage room, like the first night and things like that, was just absolutely insane. It was just crazy to watch, just seeing him, like I said, just sabotage his game almost the second the feeds turned on. We just saw him doing that. He had people that were rallying behind him, and then they just ultimately dropped him because they realized there really was no saving him. He put himself in a position where he was at the bottom, but he never really was in a good position to start out with, and so he really has nobody to blame but himself at that point. So yeah, overall, it's just really shocking to see Matt go out in the way that he did, but I'm honestly fine the way that he went out, because I think if he had gotten any farther, we would have continued, especially the way he was being edited. I think it honestly is for the best that he ended up going when he did, between the sympathetic edit and the constant schmaltzy segments with Makensy. I really am not sad to see him go at all. Yes, he maybe had some entertaining moments here or there, but I think we got all we needed to out of him, and I really don't have any issue with him leaving in the way that he did. Like I said, I think he mostly ended up doing it to himself, and so I don't really have a ton of sympathy for him leaving the game. I'm glad to see that he has been a really good sport about it in interviews, talking about Angela and how she didn't really mean anything harmful and things like that, but other than that, I don't really have a ton to say. He played very differently than I expected him to, and I don't think he really subverted that expectation of being the typical jock and things like that. He was so desperate to do so. I don't think he was really able to do that, but I also think that he wasn't exactly a very competent player, and I think that it just continued to get worse and worse from as the week went on, so not really surprised to see him go here. And he seems like a nice guy. Generally, I don't think Matt is a terrible person or anything. I think he mostly just overplayed. And he also, again, he's just that kind of archetype that I think we're just really tired of. So getting to see that, him getting first boot and, just actively sabotage his game left and right, it's just really refreshing to watch. Just think about this first week. We have a 50-year-old woman as the HOH in an equitable comp, followed by another 30-year-old woman winning a veto. followed by a Hawaiian, a Hawaiian guy winning, followed by a Hawaiian gay guy winning the AI arena. I mean, again, just what a difference equitable comps make. I can't talk about that enough, but I really just think that Matt is someone who was so convinced that he would just be able to rely on just comps and people just generally liking him that he never really anticipated that he was going to have to struggle within the house, and he just didn't really know how to really go about it, and that's really what got him in the position that he did throughout the week. So again, is it sad to see him go? I guess, because I enjoyed the ride between him and Angela, but I like that she got her way in the end. I think that we saw all we needed to of this rivalry, and considering how some people have reacted, I think it's best that we don't see it anymore. Now, quickly, before I do close things out here, I do want to talk briefly about what they did not show on this episode, which isn't nearly as much as some of the other weeks. Big thing to talk about is that they spend not a lot of time, they spend some time on the barbershop. That is an entirely fake alliance for basically everybody except like Matt, Leah, and Makensy. Everyone else is like well aware that that alliance is fake. They even refer to it as the BS alliance. So I was honestly shocked that they gave it airtime and didn't do like what they did last season with like the Cam and Red alliance in Big Brother 25, where they revealed that it was like fake. I wish they would have done that, because that is the case. Like, this is not a real alliance in any way, so if they continue to show it on the show and act like it's real, it's gonna be really funny to me, because barely anybody takes it seriously at this point except for Makensy. The other big thing here is that they spend a lot of time focusing on Matt trying to get votes, and I mean, I'll just tell you guys right now, nobody really was ever considering keeping him. I think everybody wanted Matt to go, especially after he was trying to get Tucker to volunteer for the block, and then trying to get Tucker up on the block and things like that, and how everything went down after Angela's meltdown. The only people that were actively going to keep him are the people that voted for him, so again, that part was just factually not true at all, and that's why I said the first half of this episode was kind of ridiculous in terms of like just how much they fabricated things. But then the other part to note here is that while Kenny was so convinced that like Matt had his back, didn't want to campaign against him, what he doesn't realize that Matt was actually campaigning against him like prior to the eviction and things like that. So it actually is really funny that Kenny spends the entire week like campaigning to leave when Matt is throwing his name out to other people and kind of just running with it. That's really all I can think of that they didn't show. Well, there was the Angela and Lisa fight, but even we don't really know what happened there, other than it led to Lisa telling Angela that she can't associate with her for like, her like mental health and things like that, which is insane to me. But other than that, I think I pretty much covered everything that we didn't see that I think was of some importance in this episode. But overall, I mean, just what an insane first week this really was. Between the equitable comps, the already historical fight that we got between, well, it really was not really a fight. It was more of a speech than anything. The constant fluidity here. Again, the fact that we don't have any sort of consistent structure, even by the end of this week, is so refreshing to watch. Everybody is so non-committal and unsure of themselves, and that's just not something we typically get in Big Brother. It is a fucking anomaly that is still happening at this point, especially in BBUS, which at this point, even in Big Brother 25, as much as I enjoyed that first week, things were pretty much set in stone by the end. We knew that, like, the professors were the ones that had the upper hand and that the handful wasn't going to last. We knew that Kirsten was leaving, but this week wasn't really like that. It was generally unpredictable. We started off with Kenny being the target, and then Lisa almost became the target because people were so sick of her, and then she wins veto, and then Matt ends up going up on the block, and we really don't know who's going to leave between Matt and Kenny until we get to the eviction vote, and that just made things so much more interesting. But also with Matt gone, it opens up a lot of interesting possibilities for the game moving forward. Someone like a Leah and a Makensy, I'm very interested to see how they do go about this week. Now, obviously, I know a lot of what's happened because, like I said, I watch feeds and I've also read things that have happened when I haven't been able to watch. But it's going to be really interesting to see how they end up going about this. I think that, you know, they've both now voted in the minority, and Lisa especially voting there is ridiculous, because people literally told her how to vote and she still voted for Matt because she thought that's what the majority was doing. So that's crazy to me. But either way, I mean, I think this just has the potential to be a really great season. I think everything we get this week really has me excited to see how everything does go down. You know, really just has me excited. I feel like this is going to be a very potentially unorthodox season of Big Brother, where there isn't some alliance in power the entire time. There isn't, you know, very little shifts in power. This kind of could end up being the opposite of last season, where, you know, we don't have this major alliance running things and then they get exposed, and then the rest of the season kind of ends up being a slog because the other side dismantles it, and then there's almost no structure aside from people we don't like. I think this season is going to be something really exciting. I think you have people that are playing far more self-interested games, but also a lot of them not really playing the best of games, and that to me is way more interesting to watch than the same people winning things over and over again, and, you know, targeting people who have very little who have very little chance of staying and really aren't able to do anything to save themselves. I think this is just so much more interesting to me, and if we're able to keep the momentum of this week, I really do think we could be in for one of the best modern seasons of Big Brother in a very long time. But overall, I really am enjoying this week overall. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it for what I have to say about this week. I'm really excited to see how things do go down moving forward. Like I said, I do know quite a few spoilers, so I'm not going to try to speculate on anything because I already know what's going to happen. But that's really it for this video. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know what you guys think of this week overall. Left your thoughts on it. Like I said, I know there's a lot of things going on regarding Big Brother right now that are just really frustrating in regards to like the feeds and things like that. But don't worry, I will be talking about all of that in the next video. I really just wanted to kind of revel in how great this start was, because I don't usually start off a Big Brother season feeling this positive about things, but also especially when it comes to comps, when it comes to twists. I mean, I think that they really have kind of locked things down this season. I'm hoping that it does remain this way, but I'm also prepared for it to not be that way, because that happens a lot in Big Brother. Things start off really great and then things kind of end up going downhill, but we'll see how the season turns out. I think that things could honestly end up being really great if this cast, you know, remains just as fluid and we have a lot of, you know, just rivalries going down and things like that. I think there's just a lot of potential for this to be a really fun season. So while I was frustrated by the way some things were edited this week with, you know, Matt's overly sympathetic edit and the showman's content, I think overall they did a good job of setting up just how potentially chaotic this season could really end up being. Some really interesting rivalries, a complete lack of structure at all, with a lot of players just seemingly trying to find their way in, having Cedric and Chelsie, two people who didn't even vote but also end up in some of the best positions because of the fact that the house is so fluid right now. I mean, there's just so much potential for this season to be something great, and because of that, you just know that CBS is going to find a way to try to ruin it, because that's just typically how it goes. But I'm trying to remain optimistic. I'm trying to remain hopeful that this will be a really good season, because I'm liking what I am seeing so far. But that's basically where I think I'm going to end things here. Like I said, I'm really enjoying the way things are playing out so far. Let me know what you guys are thinking of this season overall. Left your thoughts on it. Definitely very interested to see how the rest of this ends up all playing out. But that's it for this video overall. Let me know, like I said, what you're thinking of this season. Left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.